It's a fact. It's a Friday fact. Yeah. A new fact every Friday. Ready, set, go. It's Friday. That's a fact. It's a Friday fact. Yeah. Yeah. Every Friday.
In 2024, I have challenged my team to publish an enterprise integration fact every Friday. I can proudly say that we, my team, and I did it. Here is the list of all the facts. If you need to perform an XML schema validation using the integration account, please remember that the integration account doesn't support nested schemas. The local settings file doesn't get deployed directly with Visual Studio in a way that carries along your connection strings and other critical information. We already live in a world of too much fake news. Let's try to avoid a new old one. While there has been a shift towards cloud-based integration solutions, such as Azure Logic Apps and Azure Service Bus, BizTalk Server continues to be actively used and maintained by organizations worldwide. Implementing trigger conditions isn't just about adding complexity to your logic apps. It's about bringing precision and efficiency to your workflows. In LA, implementing try-catch scopes is more than just a best practice. It's a powerful strategy for building a reliable and user-friendly workflow that elevates the logic app's robustness, fault tolerance, and overall performance. XML to JSON conversion in API management and logic apps have different behaviors. When tasks are executed in parallel branches, they do not wait for each other to complete before proceeding. LA supports the full spectrum of HTTP methods. In the realm of logic apps, the treatment of escaped characters differs from handling plain text. Logic app parameter name is unlimited. You must be aware of limitations when attempting to deploy logic apps, at least consumption, that Service Bus triggers with a peak lock. Once you deploy it, you cannot modify that trigger. Azure Logic Apps supports both dot and bracket notations. It is a fact. Workflow expression alongside the trigger expression facilitates the monitoring of your logic apps. By default, XML messages don't have this first-class experience to access the field since the message, but that doesn't mean we cannot have that experience either. Contrast with the trigger when an HTTP request is received that can perform a schema validation while the logic app executes. The response action unfortunately does not do the same. Logic apps decode all sorts of base64 files, but sometimes not how you expect. Logic app consumption and standard name have different size limits and restrictions. Parse JSON action input parameter, content, supports the use of functions. One thing that logic app standard or logic app consumption have in common is the action name size limit. You might encounter an error preventing the removal of these unused name values, especially when they are linked to existing backend configurations. If we are constructing a JSON payload inside a compose action, notice that the compose action inside Visual Studio sometimes doesn't validate if the JSON payload is valid or not. LA can implement advanced routing scenarios by using conditional split actions combined with custom expressions. If you change the trigger name inside a logic app, you may get an error while reprocessing old runs. Managing rate-limiting errors is crucial for maintaining the reliability of your applications. The generally available designer offers some great features, such as the ability to copy and paste actions, which the legacy designer lacks. Azure Integration Service is the simple and most cost-effective path to migrating a BizTalk Server environment. You can expose a function on API management directly from your function app. You can debatch XML content in logic apps similarly to how you handle JSON inputs. Did you know you can make your logic apps read-only, preventing unintentional modifications or deletions by using locks? Logic App Designer will be retired and become unavailable starting September 2024. Logic App connectors outlast HTTP connectors in default retry policies timeouts. The new Logic App Designer, GA, doesn't allow direct access to code view. LA has a dedicated AI chat, the Workflow Assistant, designed specifically for the workflows you're working on. Logic App's standard workflows can be configured to run in both stateful and stateless modes. Azure Service Bus naming size limits and restrictions. Now you can pin actions on the globally available GA Designer. Did you know that you can access the consumption connectors in Visual Studio Code? You can use the BizTalk Server Logic App Adapter to call a Logic App standard workflow. Missing environment variables can break your Logic App standard workflows. When an HTTP request is received, trigger has different behaviors depending on the designer you use. Until recently, the maximum limit of a message that we could send to a queue or topic on a service bus was 1 megabyte, and we had to use the service bus premium tier. Now, we can send a message up to a maximum of 100 megabytes on the same premium tier. Logic App GA Designer now offers a seamless transition from designer view to code view and vice versa. When working with Logic Apps Standard and Visual Studio Code, it's important to note that deploying a workflow from one project can override existing workflows in a Logic app. It doesn't matter if you are a BizTalk developer or an Azure Integration Services developer. That means you are an enterprise integration developer, which is a fact. Did you know Azure's lifecycle management can streamline how you manage data and blob storage? When working with repositories in DevOps, managing branches effectively is crucial. If you're working with Logic Apps in Visual Studio 2019, you may have encountered an issue when deploying Azure resources. The reason for that is that you might be using commands from the now deprecated Azure RM module, causing errors when running your deployment. Visual Studio Code. Have you ever faced yourself trying to open the Logic Apps standard workflow inside Visual Studio Code and get stuck in a blank canvas? The designer doesn't work? In other words, it opens a tab inside Visual Studio Code but doesn't present the trigger and actions that compose the workflow. If you do not know it already, here is a cool feature available in the globally available designer. You can resubmit your Logic app from a specific action. This can help you in cases where you have large workflows and only need a portion of the Logic app to run again. That can save you time and effort, especially when debugging or testing workflows. Visual Studio Code can be pretty lacking when it comes to features that could save you from a challenging situation, like being able to cancel a massive amount of runs. By default, your API management instance is accessed from the internet at a public endpoint and acts as a gateway to public backends. However, APIM allows you to use an Azure Virtual Network to secure access to your API management instance and to backend APIs. Nevertheless, no matter if you use the virtual network or not, you can implement a self-chained APIM request. Happy Friday, and see you next Friday for another Friday Fact.